Happy Draft Tuesday, everybody. We heard from Jeff Weltman and the Magic's approach to the number 18 pick, why it's different, but not different. And today is Prospect-a-palooza. We're going to hear from around the Locked On Podcast Network of the prospects you need to know as we get ready for the NBA draft. Let's get to it. It's time for Locked On Magic.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked On Magic. Today is June 25th, 2024. My name is Philip Rossman-Reich. I'm the senior writer over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Of course, follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, the Orlando Magic prep for the number 18 pick in the NBA draft. We'll talk about how things are a little bit different for the Magic this time around and hear from Jeff Weltman himself as the Magic prepare for the draft on Wednesday. Plus, today is Draft Tuesday, our final Draft Tuesday. So we're going to do Prospect-a-palooza. We're going to listen and hear from the experts around the Locked On Podcast Network about all the players that we suspect the Magic are targeting in the NBA draft. I'll have some thoughts of my own on them as well. So this episode might be a little bit longer than our normal episodes, but should be really, really informative. We'll get to all that coming up here in just a moment. First, we want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day, no matter when you listen to us, whether it's first thing in the morning, whether it's right when we upload. We truly appreciate you making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. Remember, there's a great Locked On podcast covering every single team in the NBA. Just search for Locked On and the team you're looking for, the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Magic is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down and the sports start to dry up. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So we're not used to this. We're not used to this. The Orlando Magic for the last decade have essentially drafted in the lottery every single year. And not just the lottery, the high lottery. Even last year, the Orlando Magic sat with the 6th pick. We're used to being in the lottery, worried about Chicago, worried about where the Magic are going to land, and expecting to get a high-impact player. Expecting to have our pick of the litter, so to speak. And to get a player that's going to make a major deal for this Orlando Magic team. That's what it's been like for the last decade. And yes, the Orlando Magic got Anthony Black and Jet Howard in last year's lottery, and there's still players that are growing and developing, and the Magic are hopeful that they'll turn into something. But this year is very different. This year is a completely different challenge. The number 18 pick does not come with the surety, with the guarantee that they're going to get an impact player. It does not come with the certainty that a lottery pick might come with. But nonetheless, the 18th pick is still a place to get a solid player. We're going to go over a lot of names here in a little bit. So have your pen and paper ready. Let's learn some names. Let's talk a little bit about these players. We will get to all of them coming up here in a minute. The Orlando Magic, though, still sit here with a choice. They still sit here with a process. And as Jeff Weltman made clear when he spoke to the media on Monday, the Orlando Magic still believe that the process that netted him who they netted with the first pick, obviously with Paolo Banchero, with the 5th pick in Jalen Suggs, the 8th pick in Franz Wagner, the 6th pick in Anthony Black, the 11th pick in Jet Howard, will net them someone solid this time around. But no doubt, picking 18 is different than picking in the lottery.
Well, obviously, the most important thing is the draft comes first. So it'll be informative in that respect, if nothing else. Obviously, you're right, Philip. 18 is different than where we've been picking more recently. And so you have to kind of recalibrate your expectations to that. But I think we're looking at some good players at 18. And our guys have been working really hard on the draft. And, it started about this time last year. And, this is the culmination of all their efforts. They do great jobs. We do a lot of background work. That the person is as important to us as the player. And so we're excited about the draft. But yeah, picking 18 is different, than picking in the lottery.
Obviously, it's different. As Jeff Weltman said, there's an acknowledgement that maybe the talent level isn't as high. The pressure may not be as high. But make no mistake about it. This is still an opportunity. Anytime you have the chance to add a key player, it is an opportunity. And while we may be recalibrating our expectations, instead of going for a player that this franchise, this team thinks can be a star, instead of maybe going for a player with that high upside, the Magic are looking for someone they expect to fill an important bench role, to grow into a solid player. Maybe that is what the Magic are looking for. Maybe that's the recalibration. They're no longer hunting for an all-star or for that home run swing. They're looking for a single. Someone that can contribute something this season or contribute into a bench role for the team that will one day compete for a championship or for the team that will make the playoffs next year. It is different. There's criticism right now over who the Magic picked last year and how they used their rookies. Both Anthony Black and Jet Howard were out of the rotation last year, but Jeff Weltman sat and said it after the draft last year. The Orlando Magic are in a new phase of their rebuild. Rookies are not guaranteed playing time. The Magic are trying to develop and grow their young players, but that is no longer the only goal. Winning matters. So ultimately, we do have to think and question, okay, which players fit the Magic's winning mentality now? Which players will contribute to winning? How much should the Magic draft based off need? How much should the Magic draft based off of best player available? Some of those questions, or the answer to some of those questions, do change. But I think what's most important to remember is that no matter where the Magic are picking, this is still an opportunity to add talent. This is still an opportunity to add a player who can make an impact, who can be part of this team. And as we prepare for free agency, as we talked about yesterday, this team is still built first through the draft. And that philosophy is as big as anything else about this Magic.
I don't know what's more important. I think it's always important to get your draft picks right if you can. And it's a chance to add a good young player who will continue on the legacy of what you're trying to build, on the court, off the court, in the locker room. And the beauty of the draft is you get to bring somebody in who becomes what the Orlando Magic are about from day one. And so hopefully if that person and player can grow into that and become a meaningful player for your team, it's worth its weight in gold.
And that's the thing. We talk about, all of this has to be viewed in the context of free agency. And we will dive a little bit more into that tomorrow as we do our last prep for the draft. And then I go over a little bit what I did in the Locked On NBA mock draft. No ultimate mock draft episodes on that, I'm sorry to say, but I'll go over what I did in my mock draft exercise with the Locked On hosts. Everything is viewed alongside, concurrently with free agency, which is obviously a huge part of this offseason. But getting a player on that rookie contract, getting that player who is ingrained from day one into the Magic culture, finding a player, finding a person as important, the person that fits who this Magic team is, that is ultimately what defines this franchise and defines this rebuild. The draft is who the Magic are. And that's why this pick at 18, whatever the Magic do with it, whoever the Magic pick with it, it's still so important. It's different. It's not the lottery. It's not a high draft pick. It's not a place where you expect to find a star. But the process and what the Magic are looking for, whether it's the length joke, whether it's the shooting, whether it's the defense, whatever it is the Magic are looking for, it stays the same at 18 as it was at 6 last year. The Magic have their process, and we're going to see where that process ultimately lands. As Jeff Weltman, though, said Monday, the draft is highly unpredictable. It is the first step in this offseason. It'll clue us into a little bit maybe what they're going to do in free agency. But at the end of the day, the Magic's goal here is to bring in talent and talent that can contribute. So Who are the options for the Orlando Magic? Well, I am glad you asked because we pretty much have a full episode still to go. We're going to talk about all the players that the Magic could pick, all the targets, and hear from the experts around the Locked On Podcast Network to get the lowdown on them. We're going to get to that coming up here in just a moment. But first, it's time for a quick word from our friends over at FanDuel. It is summer, and summer is fun for everybody, but it is a little bit of a downtime in the sports world. Among the four major sports, now that the Stanley Cup final is over, congratulations to our friends in South Florida, the Florida Panthers. Throw some rats on the ice for us. All we really got left is baseball. MLB, WNBA will have Summer League coming up. The Olympics are coming too, but the summer is kind of the time when sports starts to wind down. But FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime you are in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Jump in on those NBA futures before free agency starts. The Orlando Magic currently have the worst odds to win the championship among all teams that made the playoffs in the NBA. There are still a lot of doubters about this Magic team. So if you want to hedge your bets or you want to make just a kind of fun little bet to keep yourself going through the season, that's probably a pretty good value. Even winning the Eastern Conference, probably a pretty good value. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. We want to thank you for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. For your next listen, be sure to check out the Locked On Sports Day 24/7 streaming channel. If you want the latest on the Florida Panthers and their Stanley Cup final celebration, you want to get the lowdown on the Atlanta Hawks and what they'll do with the top pick or who is going to make trades around the NBA, the Locked On Sports Day 24/7 channel has you covered with the biggest stories in sports from the local experts like the ones we're about to hear from of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's now streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app that's part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Okay. I want this segment and the rest of this show to be kind of your shorthand. We have been a little bit slow on our draft prep. I will take full fault on that. We're trying to do a draft show every Tuesday. Get you a little bit familiar with some of the names that are going to be out there. I hope I've introduced them a little bit to you. Today is not going to be the super deep dive because we're going to do quick hitters on everyone, but this is going to be your general survey. The names that we will talk about here, there might be a few that aren't on the Magic's list or it's the Magic like to go off board a lot. We're not going to hit like Jalen Tyson or anyone, him. He's probably the only name I've left off my list, and now I've mentioned him. So there it goes. We're going to try and hit all the major targets for the Orlando Magic in the draft in this segment, and we're going to hear directly from the local experts who cover the beats, cover these teams, cover these players, and get the lowdown on all these prospects. We will hit every single one except for one. I will separate him out and talk about him individually because I do think it's worth putting him on there. Jalen Tyson did not make the cut, but know his name as well. We're going to start, though, with the big wings. We know the Orlando Magic love their big wings. They love these 6'8", 6'9", 6'10 guys who are playmakers, who are versatile. This is the Magic ideal. Give me size, give me length, give me defense, give me basketball IQ, give me guys who do something that is not typical for a player of their size. And most mock drafts that I have seen, Sam Vecini, ESPN, a lot of the kind of more solid mock drafts that I look at have had the Magic targeting these big wing players. We'll talk about what the Magic are actually going to be looking for in the draft. I'll make my prediction on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Magic. But I would agree that a big wing would not be so bad. Magic about to lose Chumo KK. They have Jet Howard to kind of fill that shooter role. I suspect they'll go mid-level with either a big wing or a shooter. And obviously, Jonathan Isaac's health is always a question. So this is an opportunity to add a player who can be a pretty immediate contributor and fill a position that's really, really important for this team. Do you want to rely on Caleb Houston? Do you want to try to platoon that power forward spot with Joe? Joe Ingles was kind of filling a lot of that spot. This is why that a lot of mock drafts, especially early on in the process, had the Magic looking at Colorado forward Tristan da Silva. So let's hear from Locked On Buffaloes, the Colorado Buffaloes podcast on Tristan da Silva.
Tristan da Silva is taking his talents to the NBA after a great 4-year career in Boulder. I'm Kevin Borba, host of Locked On Buffs, and I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about Tristan da Silva. Da Silva is a forward who is 23 years old and was named to 2 All Pac-12 conference teams during his career, one of which was this past season. He averaged 16 points, grabbed 5 boards, and his skill set is something that will immediately translate to the NBA because he's a lot like Kyle Anderson. He plays defense, he hits threes, and every NBA team needs that pronto. They need it by yesterday, and he could do just that. For more on Tristan da Silva and all things Colorado, follow and subscribe to Locked On Buffs on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast.
UCF fans, definitely subscribe to Locked On Buffs. I know that game sold out already for football season. Going to be a fun year in the Big 12 with Colorado joining the fray. But that's actually a great comparison. I've often compared Tristan da Silva to a less athletic Franz Wagner. Like we mentioned this very early in the process. I think da Silva will be gone by the time the Magic pick. I don't think he will last to 18. But you're looking at a senior player who, great decision maker, great play, good playmaker, good 3-point shooter, can get himself in the lane. Again, not the super athlete. Kyle Anderson's actually a really good comparison. I kind of have Kyle Anderson on my free agent list, perhaps. He'll probably be too rich for the Magic for what they're going to look for him for, but he would be, to me, Tristan da Silva is like the perfect addition to this team. I have confidence that he can play immediately and fit the Magic style in just about every way. At the very least, he's no worse than Chuma Okeke, who's essentially the minutes he would be replacing. If Tristan da Silva is the ideal option as the big forward, then who is the next option that kind of fits that big forward style? That would be Kansas's Johnny Furphy, another Big 12 guy. So let's hear from Locked On Jayhawks on Johnny Furphy.
Johnny Furphy from Kansas is a player perfectly suited for the NBA. I'm Derek Johnson from Locked On Jayhawks. He's a 6'8" wing who at 19 years old was a soaring late riser, went from nearly being in a future high school recruiting class to reclassifying to showing flashes off the bench to then starting in January to then from January through February going off with 12 points per game on 38% from 3. Now it was a mixed bag over his final 13 games, just 28% from 3 there. And when Kansas became more relied on him with a more injured team, you saw some deficiencies in the half court, creating his own shots and consistency, as well as on the defensive end, though there was always a high level of want to and high effort level on that end. But overall, the shooting and transition play make you think he's going to be a good fit for the NBA. For more on Furphy and all things Kansas Jayhawks, follow and subscribe to Locked On Jayhawks on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
That is a great breakdown of Johnny Furphy. That's kind of how I feel about him. When you look at his numbers aren't overwhelming. He's, again, very young player, very young forward, came over from Australia to play here in the U.S. When you look at his numbers, they're very underwhelming. But when you watch the tape, you see a player who understands when to cut and when to slash to the basket, especially in transition. That was something he showed in the Kansas loss to UCF here in Orlando back in early January, which is that game was kind of the game that got him into the starting lineup. As he was relied on more, he probably wasn't ready for a bigger offensive role. So Kansas had a lot of injuries, including to their star guard, Kevin McCullough, a senior who's probably going to go early to mid-second round. I'd have him on my list for for the 47th pick for the Magic. We'll talk more second round probably on Thursday's episode before we get to the second round. But Furphy to me is a very high upside swing. I don't think he's as ready to play in the NBA. I think that I think a lot of people, you either believe in his shot or you don't. I am not the biggest believer in his shot, but it's still something he could develop. Tristan da Silva, I think, is a more solid pick at this point. But Furphy is the guy that most mocks have going to the Magic at this point. ESPN, I know Jonathan Givony and Jeremy Woo have him going to the Magic at this point. I've seen several mock drafts. I think Vicini had him going to the Magic for a long time. I don't know if he has him in his latest mock draft. Those are kind of the two prototypical big forwards. Now, I want to look at some other wings and some other players who fit that bill. The guy that I did a mock draft. I'm going to do another mock draft for Orlando Magic Daily, hopefully, and have that hopefully up on Wednesday. The other guy that I had in my first mock draft a few weeks ago was Keshawn George of Miami. And he's a player that is all potential at this point, but the skills that he has and his size really fit what the Magic want to do. So let's hear from Locked On Canes on Keyshawn George.
Miami Hurricanes combo guard Keyshawn George is ready to start his pro career after a one-and-done season in Coral Gables. I am Alex Dono from Locked On Canes. Keyshawn George's length and versatility make him a high-ceiling NBA prospect. He's 6'8", an excellent shooter, very good ball handler. Those attributes led Miami head coach Jim Larrañaga to use him extensively at the point. George played in 30 games, started 16 as a freshman, averaging 7.8 points, 3 rebounds, 2.2 assists per game. He shot over 42% from the floor, just under 41% from three. Keyshawn George was born in Switzerland, played in France for 4 years before joining the Hurricanes. George might need some G League seasoning before he's ready to be a full-time NBA contributor, but the potential is certainly there. A player comp for him is Joe Ingles. For more on Keyshawn George and all things Hurricanes, follow and subscribe to Locked On Canes on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
And that's the thing that I really like about Keyshawn George is that he is a shooter. And shooting doesn't usually go away. Yes, I agree. He does need some more seasoning in the G League, but guess what? The Magic are perfectly positioned right now to use this pick and send that player to the G League to develop for a year. That's what they did with Jet Howard. As Jeff Waltman said Monday, they think Jet Howard had a really good year. I think they're really excited to bring him up to the Orlando Magic and give him a real chance for minutes. I think it's very possible that the Magic use this 18th pick to, again, give them a year to develop in the G League. It's certainly possible. And for me, Keyshawn George is a high upside swing. Like, again, the stats don't say that he's a very good player. Only averaged about 7 points per game, but he got up a lot of threes. I think he took like 4 or 5 threes per game, despite only scoring 7 points per game. A lot of his shots were threes. So again, you're looking at a younger, more athletic Joe Ingles. And look, I think most of us feel like we're more athletic than Joe Ingles. Sorry, Joe, we love you. Joe Ingles might agree with that statement, actually. But Joe Ingles worked for the Magic. I hate to tell you this, but yes, the defense was a problem in the playoffs, and that lack of athleticism was a problem in the playoffs. But I told you when the Magic signed Joe Ingles, you'd like him for the playmaking as much for the shooting. If Keyshawn George can develop into that, if you can kind of build him into that kind of a player, that's a really high-value player, especially coming at this point in the draft. The next guard I want to talk about is Jacoby Walter. This is more of your typical 3-and-D player. Went to Baylor, a very hard-nosed defensive team. So let's hear from Locked On Baylor about Jacoby Walter.
Baylor has had a player selected in the top 16 of the NBA draft the last 3 years. Jacoby Walter is going to be the 4th. I'm Cam Stewart from Locked On Baylor, and Jacoby Walter had a massive freshman season, averaging 15 points a game and 4 rebounds a game on the way to the Big 12 Freshman of the Year. And with his great shooting ability, and I think that defense is going to develop too, I can see a lot of Kentavious Caldwell-Pope in him, maybe even some Jalen Suggs, who became a much better shooter for the Magic this year. I do see him making an impact for someone next year, maybe a team that is contending for a playoff spot. I could see Jacoby Walter absolutely playing a role for that team. And for more on Walter and all things Baylor, follow and subscribe to Locked On Baylor on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
Starting to see a lot of guys that are similar to players that the Magic have. And look, I will fully admit, I have not watched all of these videos, so I'm kind of reacting to them as I first hear them here on the podcast. These are all players that the Magic like. Kyle Anderson is a long, tall, skilled player for his size. To hear the Locked On Baylor compare Jacoby Walter to Jalen Suggs, to Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, someone that we're talking about the Magic potentially signing this summer, that's the kind of player the Magic are looking for. And look, Walter, I think his defense is solid. It'll be something that he has to continue to improve. He's still young, but he gets into the paint really well. He can create a little bit. I don't think that'll be something he'll be relied on as much in the NBA. But if his shooting can translate to the NBA, this is a really strong pick. He's expecting to go in the top 16. We'll see if he's there at 18. We'll talk more about him very, very soon. But Jacoby Walter is definitely someone to have on your list. The last wing player that I want to get to before we move on to our next segment, to our next group of players, is someone that you probably haven't really heard of, but he might be the most Magic player of the bunch. Let's hear about Pacome Dadier.
Pacome Dadier is a young 18-year-old prospect from France who I believe has a chance to be one of the sleepers of this year's draft. I am James Barlow from the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast. Pacome Dadier stands at 6'8" and will be able to play small forward in the NBA. His last season for Ulm in Germany, Dadier averaged 6.6 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 15 minutes per game. His nice shooting touch, emerging ball handling skills, and age makes Pacome Dadier one of the more intriguing talents in this year's draft. His NBA player comparison is Caleb Martin. There's a chance Dadier can crack the rotation in his rookie season. For more on Pacome Dadier and all things NBA draft related, follow and subscribe to the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
Pacome Dadier, not mentioned there. Very, very long wingspan. He's a big, big player. And while his shooting has come a long way, he's improved a lot as a shooter, it's still a little bit of a struggle. His shooting numbers are not going to look particularly good. Dadier is a very, very raw player. And Caleb Martin, also another player that I think we've mentioned a little bit as a potential free agent target for the Orlando Magic as well, at that mid-level range. The Magic have had Dadier in Orlando. He's one of the players that has been confirmed or reported to work out in Orlando. He is an interesting player for sure. A little bit more of a long shot, but we know Orlando likes to go off board with some of these picks. So Pacome Dadier, definitely a name to know. Those are our wings. We're going to get to the bigs. We're going to get to that coming up here in just a moment. So a lot of Orlando Magic fans are looking for an upgraded center. I think it's a fair thing to say. Wendell Carter had a really tough year with injuries. I know that's a question that I have raised about him. I'm a believer in Wendell Carter. I want to say this very firmly. We'll talk more about Wendell Carter tomorrow as we talk about trades and what the Magic are looking for there. But there's definitely a sense that, okay, the Magic might need an upgraded center. We did a whole episode on this a few weeks ago. I don't believe that the starting upgraded center is certainly going to be there at 18. I think the only guy that I would probably draft to get to kind of replace Wendell Carter might be Donovan Clingan. But even then, I think Clingan is just very limited as a shooter. And I think the Magic do value versatility and do value a guy that can step out and shoot jumpers. They think they can gang rebound a little bit. I really want Wendell Carter to have one healthy season, and maybe that's asking too much. Maybe that's hoping for too much. But I think the Magic are not necessarily ready to move off of Wendell Carter. But having said that, that means the Magic do need a starter caliber third center. They need to put a center on the roster like a Goga Bitadze, who at this point I would expect will stay with the Magic in some capacity. They need a third center that can start 15 to 20 games. And to me, when you look at the center class here, that is the ultimate question, is whether the Magic can get the bigs to start with. There is one guy that I am kind of interested in, but I've heard very mixed reactions. So I'm interested to hear what Locked On Hoosiers has to say about Kel'el Ware.
Kel'el Ware from the Indiana Hoosiers is projected as a first-round pick, but I think he's still being underrated. I'm Jacob Goins from Locked On Hoosiers. Kel'el Ware is a 7-foot, 240-pound center with a 7'7" wingspan who transferred from Oregon to Indiana for his sophomore season. He was all Big Ten second team and all Big Ten defensive team and second in the conference of double-doubles and rebounds per game. His NBA draft comparison is Jared Allen of the Cleveland Cavaliers. People are asking, can he make an immediate impact on an NBA roster? And I say because of his defense, his rebounding, and his inside shot making, he will be seeing the floor early and often for whatever NBA team takes a chance. For more on Kel'el Ware and all things Indiana Hoosiers, follow and subscribe to the Locked On Hoosiers podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
By the numbers, I agree with that. Kel'el Ware does look like an NBA prospect. If there is a Derek Lively in this draft, and by Derek Lively, I mean a rookie center who just makes an impact with his energy and his effort and his ability to just be a presence around the rim, I think it's Kel'el Ware. So if the Magic do draft Kel'el Ware, that means they really believe in him because, he was a close to a double. I think he averaged a double-double in college, which is not easy to do, about 14 and 12 or something like that. He blocked about 2 shots per game. He's shown a willingness to shoot jumpers, which I think I don't think that's NBA ready yet, I think that willingness to develop that part of his game is big. But the people who are skeptics about Kel'el Ware are like major skeptics. Draft people that I trust have said, stay away from Kel'el Ware. And I don't know if that's just a bad impression off of his time at Oregon. There are questions about his motor, his effort, his desire to be good. These are things you have to suss out in the pre-draft process. You have to get that part out in the interview. You have to get that part out in the workouts to see if a player is going to put in the work to be a better player. You haven't made it just because you made the NBA. That's a step in the process. And I think that's the big question that a lot of people have about Kel'el Ware. Indiana people, and I'm glad that our friend there from Locked On Hoosiers was able to say this. Indiana people, I've seen you in the comments when I talked about Kel'el Ware too, by the way, have said, nope, effort was fine in college. He was fine with us. He played really well. We were all really impressed with him. There have been some complaints that maybe he disappears in games, floats around the perimeter too much. But, again, this is the stuff you got to suss out and figure out. And you either believe in him or you don't. But the talent is definitely there with Kel'el Ware, and I would definitely have an eye on him. The next guy is probably the biggest name in the draft, or the biggest name among the bigs. Zach Edey is a two-time Naismith Award winner. He's divisive among draft people. Let's hear what they have to say about Zach Edey.
Purdue's Zach Edey was college basketball's most dominant player the last 2 years. I'm Craig Sheeman for Locked On Big Ten. Zach Edey is a legitimate 7'4", a sturdy 300 pounds, and he's got a wingspan of 7 feet 11 inches. He averaged 25 points, 12 rebounds, and 2 blocks per game for the Boilermakers this year, and he's the 2-time National Player of the Year. His numbers coming out of college are comparable to Shaq's at LSU, but his game is more like Yao Ming's. If this draft were 20 years ago, this kid would be the number 1 pick. There's no question about it. But today's NBA game is full of shooters of all sizes on the perimeter. The one thing Zach Edey struggles with is shooting on the perimeter. In fact, he made just 1 3-pointer in his entire college career, and that was this year against Indiana, and he banked it in garbage time. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be as curious as anybody to see how he's used in the NBA. But I clearly think there's a place for him if he goes to the right team. For more on Zach Edey and all things Big Ten, follow and subscribe to Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
And I think that really does lay out the debate for Zach Edey. Like, look, he went back to college for a 4th year, and he looked more refined. He looked stronger. He looked able to kind of handle your Kel'el Wares, your big players in the college basketball realm. He looked like a man among boys, but it is also worth noting that Donovan Clingan gave him some problems. And while he did have a big game in that national championship game, Donovan Clingan, the guy who's probably going to be number 3, number 4, a top 5 pick in this year's draft, really gave Zach Edey some problems. So building a team or the right team for Zach Edey is definitely a challenge. You kind of want him to play like a Brook Lopez. And obviously Brook Lopez found new life when he added that 3-point shot. Zach Edey doesn't have that. You don't want him on the perimeter. You have to play drop coverage with him. And that's just really tough to do. You have to be able to mix your defenses up to be a high-level team in the NBA, or have Giannis Antetokounmpo to cover up all your mistakes, or to help funnel players right into you where you can block shots. I think Zach Edey is a player who can be successful. I don't think he can be successful for the Orlando Magic. I really do not have him on my board. I know that he's a player that a lot of people want to talk about. I don't think he's going to last to 18, to be perfectly honest. I think someone's going to give him a shot. That I don't have him 18th on my board. I have him lower than 18th on my board. I am not a fan of him for the Orlando Magic. If Zach Edey is a refined offensive player, a refined post-up player, a guy who knows how to use his size, someone that's still learning how to do that is Yves Missy. So let's turn back to Locked On Baylor to hear about this big man prospect.
Look out, NBA rims, because here comes Yves Missy. I'm Cam Stewart from the Locked On Baylor podcast, and we are talking about the 7-foot freshman sensation, Yves Missy, who was just a terror to the rims in the Big 12 this year, averaging over 11 points and 6 rebounds a game while ranking 3rd in the conference in block shots en route to a Big 12 all-defensive team. I think he can develop into a more polished player like a Nick Claxton type, but the comparison that sticks out to me is Clint Capella, that rim runner and rim protector. Will he have an immediate impact? It might take a little bit to get to the physicality of the NBA level, but I see him as an elite rim runner in the years to come. For more on Yves Missy and all things Baylor, follow and subscribe to Locked On Baylor on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
want to thank Cam for doing double duty there with both the Jacoby Walter and Yves Missi, but that gets to a lot of, I think, is a story about Yves Missi. Like we see this a lot in the NBA where there are these very raw rim protecting bigs. And look, Yves Missi has size. I remember watching Baylor come here to UCF. I cover UCF for the Associated Press. So I remember using out of some scouting, and I remember seeing Yves Missi and very much noticing his size, even against UCF size. But even in that game, you could see bigger players bug him. And so it feels like he's like very much like one of these young players who use their athleticism and size to their advantage to overpower smaller opponents. But when they meet up against other players who are just as athletic, it takes them a while to adjust. And look, Yves Missi is very, very young. He's going to need some time to develop to get up to that physicality, as Cam said there. But you got to question whether the Magic have the patience to do that. Obviously, I think Orlando does need rim protection. I think that is a big thing. But when you're looking at young rim protectors, I think you want to see that you got to question whether a player can learn the discipline. It's easy to go chase blocks, but it's harder to understand. I can change a shot by my presence. I can change a shot by my length just as much as I can get a block. Because if I go for a block and I miss it, I'm out of position for rebounds. And I think that is the area where Yves Missi struggles. And I think that's why I have Kel'el Ware, who's also a good shot blocker, but also an excellent rebounder. That's why I have Kel'el ranked pretty much the highest of these center options that I'm speaking about here. The last center I want to get to is Duke big man Kyle Filipowski, a player that we know has been through Orlando. Let's hear about Filipowski now.
Duke big man Kyle Filipowski benefited from playing a second season with the Blue Devils, but now he's ready to begin his NBA career. I am Alex Dono from Locked On ACC. Filipowski is a proven commodity as a 7-footer who can flex his game out to the perimeter. He enjoyed an All-American season in 2024 as a sophomore, started all 72 games over his 2 years with Duke. Filipowski improved his overall shooting percentages and three-point percentages in his second year. In 2024, he shot 34.8% from three, 50.5% overall, and he hauled in over 8 rebounds per game. Kyle Filipowski can help an NBA team immediately. The question is, will he develop into a star or just a steady contributor? A common player comp for him is Kelly Olynyk. For more on Kyle Filipowski and all things Duke, follow and subscribe to Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
It's interesting that Alex there speaks about Filipowski's shooting because I think that is going to be the big differentiator for him. There's a lot to like about Filipowski. I think that he's a really skilled player. I think that he has a really strong low post game, especially. I think his low post game is very, very good. He works really well around the basket. You can give him the ball in the high post, much like the Magic do with Wendell Carter. He'll make smart passes. He'll make smart plays. He sets good screens. But I think his NBA success depends on whether he can hit that shot. Not even necessarily the outside shot, but that 15-foot jumper, that 18-foot jumper. I think that's going to be a big piece of the puzzle for Kyle Filipowski and ultimately whether he is successful in the NBA or not. That is a tough thing because I think that centers these days have to be skilled in so many ways, and just traditional low post centers don't work so much anymore. It's just again, the post is just, unless you can work to get switches, post ups are just not efficient. The NBA is kind of, NBA analytics universe has gotten rid of some of those players. So I think Kyle Filipowski, a little bit of a dinosaur, a little bit of a guy that I think may not be able to adjust to the NBA. I'm much more bullish on him or bearish. I don't know what the right term is. I'm not as high on him as our friend from Locked On ACC. Those are your centers. Those, I think, are the center options the Magic are looking for. The next, point guards. There are a lot of interesting point guards the Magic could chase. We'll talk about some of the big ones coming up here in just a moment. So I am saving the point guards for last because I read my script wrong and I was going to do them in the second segment and I did not. But also works out that way because now you've had to wait for the point guards. We all know point guard is a big need for the Orlando Magic. Honestly, I would say if there's one thing that I think the Magic have to resolve or the Magic have to address is they need another playmaker. They need someone that can make Paolo Banchero's life easier. And so, I think there's a lot of these options in the NBA draft. It wouldn't surprise me if the Magic take a point guard even after taking Anthony Black last year and even knowing that, Jalen Suggs might be playing point guard again. Anthony Black is there. Cole Anthony's there. They'll have a little bit of a crowded point guard room. Even then, that just might be the best player and the best option available for the Magic. So I have been shying away from picking point guards in my mock drafts. We'll talk mock drafts more tomorrow. But I've been shying away because I do expect the Magic to try and acquire a veteran point guard or a veteran ball handler. I think that they're looking to fill that open guard spot, whether it ends up being Jalen Suggs and another guard, another shooting guard, or whether it's a point guard next to Jalen Suggs. I think they've been saving that spot open for a veteran. So I think there is a little bit of a log jam here with the point guard position. Having said that, there are some really interesting and intriguing options. And the first one is probably not going to be available for the Magic. He seems to have climbed enough lists to get out of the Magic's range. But I still want to talk a little about Devin Carter from Providence.
Providence point guard Devin Carter is perhaps the most versatile guard in this entire draft class. I'm Andy Patton, the host of the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. Carter is a 6'3" guard who did a little bit of everything last year for Kim English and the Friars. Armed with an elite 6'8" wingspan, Carter is a high-level defender and rebounder for his position, who averaged just under 20 points per game last year while posting elite defensive numbers and shooting about 38% from three. Carter's length and defensive chops are reminiscent of a pair of Boston guards Drew Holiday and Derek White, and while that's a tough ceiling, it is within reach for the versatile guard. For more on Devin Carter, the Big East, and all things college basketball, check out the Locked On College Basketball Podcast on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts.
How many boxes for the Orlando Magic and their draft did you check off there? We got the wingspan, 6'3" with a 6'8" wingspan, excellent defender, excellent rebounder for his position. So he does something that is unique for a smaller guard, just kind of like Cole Anthony does, and he's a better rebounder than Cole Anthony. Having that is a big deal. And I think, Devin Carter is probably going to be gone, but if he is somehow there at 18, the Magic are going to take him and run with it because they'll find a way to put him on the floor. The shot at 38% does need improving. His free throw percentage was low, but he's also on the ball a lot more and probably more than he would be for the Orlando Magic. So you get a bunch more catch and shoot opportunities. So that is an important thing to remember, especially as we talk about some of these guards. Obviously, shooting is a big need for the Orlando Magic. And for me, among the guards, there's no shooter like Jared McCain, one of my favorite prospects in this draft. So let's hear from our friends at Locked On ACC once again about Jared McCain.
Duke Blue Devils freshman sensation Jared McCain might be the best shooter in this NBA draft. I am Alex Dono from Locked On ACC. While he doesn't have the best length at 6'2", McCain makes up for so much of that with his high basketball IQ, his sharp shooting, and his crafty finishing at the rim. Shot 41.4% from beyond the arc last year, played over 31 minutes per game, averaging 14.3 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and 1 steal per contest. McCain, by the way, he's got 3 million followers on TikTok, so he's multi-talented, but he's all business when it comes to basketball. That's his number one priority. The ACC All-Rookie and All-ACC Honorable Mention can help an NBA team immediately with his shooting. A common NBA comp for him is Seth Curry. For more on Jared McCain and all things ACC, follow and subscribe to Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
I wouldn't go so far as to say that Jared McCain is the best shooter in this draft. I love Dalton Connect. I love I like Reed Shepherd. I don't necessarily like him for the Magic, but I like Reed Shepherd. And then you have Baylor Shireman, who we were not going to talk about today, but keep an eye on Baylor Shireman of Creighton, 6'8" forward, excellent shooter, not a great defender. But you heard there, Jared McCain has a lot of the tools the Magic like. He's high basketball IQ, can run the point, can be a little bit of passer, average 4 or 5 assists per game, and be an excellent shooter. The size is going to be the concern with him, and that's why he's sitting at 18 and sitting around this teenish range rather than up in the lottery for sure. Is the lack of size is a real issue, and I think there's some concern about his ability to get to the basket and create penetration. He doesn't have a great initial burst. That's one of the big complaints. He's not a good finisher around the basket. He really struggled there. But I will say this, you watch his tape, he can get his shot off over taller defenders. He knows how to create enough space for himself at his own pace to create those shots. Now, doing that at the college level is different than doing it at the pro level, and that's ultimately, I think, the question about Jared McCain. But all the mechanics are there as a shooter, as a sometimes point guard, as a playmaker to make decisions. If you believe in the IQ, if you believe in that ability to create separation, he is someone that can play for you and again, play a role. It's not necessarily about being a starter. It's about playing a role. Seth Curry may be a low ceiling. Seth Curry can play a role on a team, and I think he could be better than Seth Curry, but he's definitely someone to keep an eye on. The player that I do have to mention that we don't have a video for Locked On Network. Carlton Carrington of Pitt. Very much a favored prospect for the Magic. I think Zan Facini of The Athletic has had him going to the Magic at various times during this draft process. He is considered a 3-and-D point guard. Its 3-point percentage is not going to look good, but Carlton Carrington had to carry a lot of Pitt's offense. He is an outstanding player. He really came on with the scoring, especially toward the end of the season when things really, became big for Pitt. He is an excellent defender, a little bit on the small side, not much of a distributor at the point guard position, but the dude can score, dude can get after it. He is definitely someone to have an eye on for the Magic. Let me pull up his stats for you since we don't have the video on him. We've talked about him at various times, but Carlton Carrington last year averaging, let me get the average here, 13.8 points per game, 41.2% shooting on 11.7 field goal attempts per game, 5.2 rebounds, 4.1 assists per game, only 1.9 turnovers per game. So pretty strong correlation there. He only shot 32.2% from three on 6.1 attempts per game, but shot 78.5% from the foul line, although just on 2.8 attempts per game. In ACC play, shot 77.8% from the floor, averaged 13.5 points per game. Again, he's maybe not the dynamic scorer. He's certainly not Devin Carter at that level, but Carlton Carrington, Bub Carrington, people believe that if you take the ball out of his hands a little bit, make him a little bit more of a spot-up shooter, he can be more successful as a shooter. Again, you see he has to create a lot for his team. Bub Carrington is definitely a name to know, definitely a name to have on your list, and I wish I had a video to give more reasons why the Magic should be interested in him. The last prospect to talk about today, then, is a prospect who may or may not be available for the Orlando Magic, a player who was considered a top 5 pick before the lottery, but has dropped significantly because of an injury. And in several mock drafts, I have seen him slip all the way to the Magic at 18. If this player is available, I think the Magic might have to take him and run. Let's hear about Nikola Topic.
Nikola Topic, a Serbian guard who plays for Red Star in Belgrade, Serbia, is an interesting player, and it will be interesting to see where he lands due to tearing his ACL recently, but he does boast unique skills as a big point guard who thrives in the pick and roll. I'm Leif Tulin of Locked On NBA Big Board, and Topic, to me, if everything goes perfectly, could have the most desirable skill set of the draft as an offensive weapon, who will distribute and score out of the pick and roll using his 6'6", 200-pound frame. Topic averaged nearly 15 points and 6 assists this season and demonstrated that skill set with an 89th percentile pick and roll operating ability, which is classified as excellent percentage. And then his shot becomes the question. Is it good enough to punish the defenses that dare him to shoot or go under screens, as he's a crafty driver to the basket who couples size and strength and creativity to finish off plays himself, despite lacking top-end speed nor elite top-end athleticism? Time will tell, and tune into Locked On NBA Big Board or on YouTube or your favorite podcasting app to hear more thoughts on Topic.
Nikola Topic is obviously a topic of hot conversation and probably going to be one of the more divisive picks in this draft. Look, you're going to have to wait out the injury. There's no getting around it. There's a partially torn ACL. He's going to have surgery on it. He's probably going to be out all of next year. And so whichever team drafts him is going to have to be patient. Luckily, the Magic are a team that does have patience. 6'6" point guards. Yeah, we have an Anthony Black at home, but the Magic want as many of these big ball handlers as possible. They want size. They like length. And if Topic can figure out how to shoot, and that's kind of the big question mark with him. He is not a great shooter yet, but he's a great playmaker, great decision maker, high basketball IQ player. These are the players the Magic like. You take that with the size, with the potential to run point at his height. That could be something the Magic look for. It's just going to be about, can you get the medicals? Can you feel confident that he's going to recover from an ACL injury? It's a major injury. We've seen that with Markelle Fultz and Jonathan Isaac over the last few years. That can be a slog to get over and get over that. That's going to be that's the pain tolerance that a team that drafts him is going to have. But you can't deny Nikola Topic has a ton of talent. He is, again, top 5, potential. This is like Michael Porter falling to the Denver Nuggets. You take the patience and you take the talent. If Topic is there at 18, you pick him. And honestly, you pick him and you don't think twice about it. Unless the reason why he fell so much is that the medicals are really, really bad. They don't think he's going to recover from the ACL, which at this point, there's nothing to suggest that. Those to me are the prospects to know as we get ready for the NBA draft. Those to me are the guys that I have very high on the Magic's board. I mentioned a few other names: Jalen Tyson from Cal, pure scorer from Cal, bounced around a couple different programs until he found the right fit at Cal, but an ace scorer, an ace creator, kind of a Cam Thomas type, if that's the direction the Magic want to go. I mentioned Baylor Shireman of Creighton as another option. Let me go through the rest of my list here. I got my cheat sheet here. Other names to maybe keep an eye on. I think Tajon Salon will be gone. Tyler Kolek, more of a traditional point guard, smaller at 6'3", but an excellent passer and playmaker. I've been seeing him get compared to TJ McConnell. Deron Holmes would be the other big that I would mention from Dayton. I love him a lot. Undersized a little bit at 6'8", but rebounds really well. Is developing his 3-point shot. Came a long way this year. Dayton was just a beast. Just a really excellent rebounder for his size. On the post is just whether you can play power forward or whether you need him to play an undersized center is the question with him. There are a lot of options here in this NBA draft. And, the deeper you get into the draft, the wider that net has to become, the more prospects kind of get pulled into your orbit. We've gone for 50 minutes here. But, 40 minutes of that has been talking about these prospects. So on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Magic, I'm going to go over who I have the Magic taking in our Locked On mock draft. I'll go over some of the trades that I discussed, whether I pulled one off or not, what I think the limitations are on the trade market for the Orlando Magic, and I will talk as well about who I have the Magic taking in a non-trade mock draft. So again, we'll go over some of these names once again. But that's how we'll get ready for the NBA draft on Wednesday. But that's going to do it for me today. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. You can, of course, find me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Himalaya, Google Play, Spotify, Odyssey, and all the fun makes on podcasts to your podcast-enabled listening device. Be sure to check us out on YouTube as well. You can find us on YouTube by searching for Locked On Magic. Thank you to all the subscribers. We've passed 3,000 subscribers and still growing, so I appreciate all the listens there. For the latest on the Orlando Magic, be sure to check out OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can find us there on Twitter at OMagicDaily. And of course, be sure to check out my Patreon page, Orlando Magic Hub, at patreon.com/Orlando Magic Hub for even more Orlando Magic content, including videos from interviews. You can check it out at patreon.com/Orlando Magic Hub. As always, thank you for your support. If you enjoyed today's episode and hearing about all the prospects from all the great hosts around the Locked On Podcast Network, then you need to check out the Locked On Sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. That's going to do it for me today, though. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. I want to thank all the Locked On hosts around the network who gave us a lowdown on all the prospects and helped us enjoy this Prospect-a-palooza here on Draft Tuesday. But for Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic, this has been Philip Rossman-Reich. We'll see you all again next time for another episode of Locked On Magic.